So I'm Heather Heidi. I previously was Heather O'Call, so some people still know me that way. I finally got around to changing my name. I've been a program manager on the project team for almost 10 years now. I'm basically the PM lead for the project client and some of the more project manager features in Project Server. So if you have any feature questions, requests, concerns, whatever about any of those areas, definitely feel free to come talk to me after the session at the booth. The party tomorrow night. I will not be on stage doing karaoke, so I should be easy to find, etc. I'm more than happy to talk to everyone. And this, for us, is great learning opportunities for you, but actually everyone from the product group, we learn a ton about how project is actually used in the real world from talking to everybody at conferences. We love it. Find the green shirts, talk to them. So this session then is Power Tools for Project Managers. So basically what we're going to be covering today is why, if you are using Project Server or Project Online, as a project manager, you should want the project client. Okay, so we have some peas, peanut butter, milk, and the PWA homepage. What do all of these have in common? I heard one. Yell it. Start with the letter P? Well, not milk, but it was a really good guess. I had never even realized those were so close. I guess they're all okay on their own, but when you add their buddies, they get so much better. So if you add cookies to milk, clearly that is an improvement. Jelly to peanut butter, much better. When you add the project client to PWA, much better experience. You can do them on your own. You probably want to accompany them with their buddies. And that's what we're going to concentrate on this talk. Mainly on PWA and Project Online, although I will talk about cookies for a very long time if anyone wants to have a chocolate chip cookie recipe trade-off. So historically, PWA and Project Client didn't overlap at all. Everything that the project manager would do, updating a schedule, was in the Project Client. And then everything else was in PWA. So managing your resources, viewing server reports, tracking status, etc. was all in PWA. And then gradually we've started adding some schedule management features to PWA too, so now there becomes a question of oh, do you actually need both of them, or can you just do all your schedule management, your project manager scenarios in the project client, in PWA? And I'll show you the answer is you can do a lot, but it gets a lot better when you add the project client. Now, there are a number of roles of people who use PWA. So you have your team members who want to see the project sites, to see all the collateral. They want to report status. They want to submit timesheets. And for them, we just announced we have Project Lite. So if you were at the keynote this morning, Jared announced it. I forget the price, but it's a much more discounted price with limited functionality, everything a team member should need. Then you have project managers who work in Project Online or Project Server, and you can connect Project Pro to that and get that more optimal experience I mentioned. And basically, they want to create and update projects. Then you have your resource managers, your portfolio managers, and your executives, and most of them can all live in the full versions of Project Online or Project Server and be very happy there. It has everything they need. So really, the one spot you need to think about is, what does your project manager need? Can they get by with just having the server, or do they need the client too? Where the rest of them are pretty clear-cut, which world they belong in. So what are some things that should help you make this decision? So some of the advantages of PWA are there's no software requirements. You just need a modern browser. So for current version of Chrome, IE, Firefox. What's the Apple one? I'm blanking. Safari, thank you. See, I'm not an Apple person. Works on any operating system, so if you are an Apple person, you can use it on your iPads, your iMacs, your Eyes, whatever's. It still feels lighter and faster. For a lot of people, just doing things online as opposed to going to an Office client feels like a lighter, faster experience. That's probably not always the case, but it's perception. And it's cheaper. So if you saw from the last slide, you don't need to pay the price to have Project Online and Project Client. You can just pay for Project Online. But then, of course, you're giving up functionality. So what is some of that functionality you're giving up? Well, in the Project Client, we have a lot of richer views and reports. So PWA, we have the timeline and we have the Gantt chart. In Project Client, we have things like Team Planner. We have usage views to give you your time phase data. We have that whole new reports feature that we saw in the keynote today. A couple other things I'm missing, but I'll demo them later. We also have the full scheduling engine features. So scheduling engine is in PWA, but it's not full featured yet, so you can't do things like leveling. Master project support is only in the project client, so if you use master projects, you can't edit them through PWA. The project client has an offline mode, so if you're getting on a plane and you don't feel like paying for the online, whatever, $8 it is, you can work with your project schedule still if you have the client, and much, much more. And sorry, I'm losing my voice, so I will have to have water breaks. Okay, so let's take a look at the experience actually if you're in PWA, what it would look like for a project manager. Okay, so here I am in Project Center. I have all my projects. I have my Project Center level timeline, which you can put on projects or tasks. So if you want to call it a big milestone, I can add that here. But we're going to drill into a project. And then we're going to check it out so we can edit it in the browser. And notice, so right now, it kind of does look like the project client, right? You have your task list, you have your timeline view, Gantt chart. All looks very familiar. I can make updates now that I've checked it out, so that's actually going to be 3 days. And notice how the project plan automatically updated. So if you've used older versions of the schedule web part, you used to have to click the was it recalculate or schedule button? I forget the name, but you used to have to constantly be clicking that. You no longer have to. It automatically does it. To step back, why it does is previously we have a huge scheduling engine project. That's what figures out how each task should behave, what happens anytime you update a field. All that's our scheduling engine. It's kind of like the calc engine in Excel. We have a scheduling engine. We used to have 2 copies of that. We had the server copy and we had the client copy. Anyone in software development who knows how hard it is to keep copies of things running the exact same will know that was not the best plan. So in 2013, we did a big investment to make our calculation engine work on both. So we're now running on one calculation engine. So you should always have your schedules the same between the client and the server. And that allowed us to do things like the automatic scheduling we have now. It also let us do more features. So you can now do cost and material resources in Schedule Web Part. You can do deadlines. You can do tasks of all different task types. And we've added more assignment fields too. So the question is it basically a client-side calculation or server-side? It's server-side. And actually, can we try questions for the end? I'll leave lots of time. No worries, I forgot to say that. Let's see. So yeah, it has a lot more support than it did in 2010. So if you've used it in 2010, I definitely want you to try it out in 2013. It's much more powerful. So I'll show you again. Automatic scheduling. So that's probably one of the biggest things you'll notice. Another feature that we added, it was a very popular request, was the ability to save a baseline through Schedule Web Part. So I can now come here, click Set Baseline, and you'll notice I am setting the baseline here. So big feature request. We added it based off your feedback. We really do listen, I promise. And this really helps. And you can come into your views. So let's see. And I can see my baseline, and then if I flip out a task, you can see how that affected your schedule. So you get a lot of that client features here now. So the red line is my critical task, and then the gray line is that baseline I just saved. And I can save it again. I can clear the baseline. I can save other baselines. What you can't do is all the granular levels of baseline. So I can't say set baseline 1 for this selection of tasks like you can in the client. You still have to go to the client for that. Another thing which you've probably noticed is we have the timeline view here. So I can select any task, click Add it to the timeline, rearrange the timeline, change the colors, display it as a callout. A lot of the timeline behavior that you are used to in the client, you can do that in Schedule Web Part. And this is the same timeline view data. So if I was to open this schedule in the project client, or if maybe you work in Schedule Web Part, one of your coworkers works in the project client, they would see this same timeline too. And this same timeline actually goes through to the project site. So if you have a project site associated with this schedule, you'll see this timeline there too. Another thing I want to point out, this is actually a SharePoint feature, but it's a great addition to the Schedule Web Part. Has anyone noticed this up in SharePoint pages? No one really knows about it, but it's a great feature. It basically removes your Chrome from the left side, and now you're full screen of your content. Whenever you need your Chrome, you can check it, but it's a great feature for working with Schedule Web Part because then it becomes almost more WAC-like, so the Excel Web Access Companions and stuff, full screen, you have that view. So it makes Schedule Web Part easier to use. And then another piece of feedback we had on Schedule Web Part was the ability to do assignment units. And with 2013, you can do that now too. So the field is available to add to any of your assignment views. So I've added it to assignment work. And notice, let's see, if I change this, it's currently finishing on 129 with 16 hours of work. If I change this to 200%, notice I'm now finishing on 128 instead of 129. So units, you can update them at the assignment level, and they're fully calculated just like you would expect in the project client. So basically, this is the area your project manager would spend the most time working in PWA, because it's the schedule, and as we know, this is what the project managers care about, is the schedule management. But there's probably some questions your project manager has when they're looking at their schedule. Are any of my resources over allocated? What else are my resources working on? Because probably these resources are working on more than one project. They might need to update work contours. So maybe I need to edit time phase data because for 5 days I'm going to spend only 4 hours on the task, but then I'm going to spend 8 hours, something custom like that. Maybe I need to create reports to share with the customers to show them like, hey, things are actually going well. Maybe I have to make some cuts to my project and I want to be able to see what would happen if I remove the task and then add them back and do some what-if planning. And maybe I just want to update part of my baseline. So these are all common scenarios you could see a project manager wanting to do, and they're not fully supported by PWA. This is when you would have to move to the project client to answer these, or I'll update that. You don't have to move to the project client for all those. It's much easier if you move to the project client. So let's switch over to the project client. That's there. So I have another project plan here open, and let's see some of these same questions answered here and see the advantages of using project client. So one of the first things you notice is you have this yellow checkout bar here because I opened the project read-only. If anybody's used to using the project client with the server, we didn't used to show you that. We would just have the tiny read-only up in the top bar, and you'd make all these edits and then realize you're read-only and you have to throw away your edits. Anyone? See some nodding. So now I can actually make an edit. Actually, let's do a task that's not completed. And then I'm like, oh, I'm read-only. I click checkout, and my edits are kept, and I now have the file checked out, and I can keep going. Thank you. The only time that won't work is say I open it read-only, and he has it checked out and is making updates, and then when I click checked out, even if he's checked it back in, it will have to reload it because I don't have the latest data. But assuming I have the latest version, it will just seamlessly switch from read-only to read-write mode. Not really an advantage of why you should use Project Client over PWA, but a feature that we added that will just make people happier, including people on my team who have done this too. Because we actually do use Project to manage our projects, if you're wondering. So enough of that. That was kind of my just random one. I wanted an opportunity to point out today, and this was the best opportunity I had. So right away, so one of my first questions was, are any of my resources over allocated? So I opened the project schedule, and you notice there's the red indicator in the indicators column for like task 11, 12, 13. So I can immediately see that some of my resources are over allocated and have too much work. And why is this important? If my people have too much work, something's not going to get done. It could be this work, and it's going to cause my project to slip out. So I'm probably going to want to handle this. Now, what are some good ways to handle this? Oh, and I think I deleted a task name. So let's just add this back. So I can come here and I can just kind of visually be like, oh, it looks like Jill could do it, but that's not going to work if I have a ton of tasks. One way I like to do it is the Team Planner view. So I come Resource tab and click Team Planner. I can see like, oh, actually, Glenn here is over-allocated with way too many tasks in this project, but he's actually working on other projects at the same time. So he's never going to be available for this one. I could potentially talk to the resource manager and see if I could get Glenn moved off those other projects onto this project. But let's see what those projects are. So if I double-click that, it expands it. I can see, oh, he's on the content filtering design and implementation project. Well, that's like our boss's baby. Like, that's not moving. Like, I need to move my stuff. And I have a couple options for how to do that. I can just drag them to other people to reassign them. If they're not time critical for that point and I really want Glenn to do it, I could move it out in time. But he actually still has a conflict. So he doesn't actually have a full spot for this. So maybe I have him make hardware vendors smaller so he can do the part that's most important, and I can split it to someone else would be an option too. So I can do this all manually, but maybe I don't want to do that, and I just want project to handle the overallocation for me. If that's the case, I can come back to my Gantt chart. On my resource tab, I can click level. And actually, that's an issue with Glenn that we saw, so we'll just skip that. And notice how my project plan was rearranged, and most of my overallocations were now solved. I still have that issue with Glenn, but at least I have the information I need to know how to resolve that issue. So I can see clearly that he is on another project, and I probably need to get a different resource for all of his tasks. If he's mission critical to my project, I need to start having those conversations. So, it's software, it can't solve everything, but it helps you know the information you need to know who to talk to and then who to take that next step with. Another thing, so I showed you the Team Planner view, how you can see all other projects here. You can also see those in your resource usage views to see exactly how far people are over and when. To switch to my resource usage view, this was one of the things I mentioned that you don't have in Project Server is you don't get to see time phase data ever. So I scroll to tasks, I can see exactly how much work everybody has in certain time frames. I can again see when people are over allocated. So as I mentioned, Glenn is over allocated because of the other projects, and I can see what those other projects are here. So again, help me solve the issue. And one of my other things I point out earlier is you can not only see the time phase data, you can update it. So let's take this one. Actually, I need her to work 4 hours, and then 8 hours just for this project. The first parts, we only need half a day on it. Maybe I'll have her do some other work at this point, like this one. So I have this. So I have the granularity level here to be really, in PWA, you have big knobs and dials to turn. In WinProj, you have the little knobs and dials to turn. So you can really go in there and set everything you want to. So another thing I mentioned is sometimes, well, not sometimes, probably lots of times, you have more work you want to do than you can do. Ever happen? Anybody? Never? You guys, wow. Let my boss talk to your boss. No, so we often have things that we can't get to it, but we don't want to delete it quite yet because maybe we're like, oh, maybe we'll get the budgets, maybe we'll get the new hire, maybe the earlier things will go faster than we thought. I know that typically doesn't happen, but maybe it will. So let me scroll to this one to see it. You can do something in the project client called inactivate. And basically what that does is it removed all these tasks from the project schedule, but it kept them there in case I want to bring them back. So the tasks are still there. Any custom field associated with that task is still there, all the data, but it wouldn't affect my resource availability. It wouldn't affect my project finish date, budgets, anything else where the numbers roll up. Basically, inactive tasks are ignored. And you can even see like this task came back in the schedule because it no longer has to wait for these. But then say I'm like this lucky gentleman right here who said he never runs out of budgets. His boss is back there probably being like, we're going to have a chat. I can reactivate this task. Did I click the wrong one? And those tasks immediately come back to my project, and I can move forward. And exciting because we get to do everything we want. Another thing I mentioned, if we scroll down to the bottom, let's say that we have to make a lot of changes here. Like we re-estimated these tasks, and it's going to be a lot longer than we thought to save to complete this work. So we'll go 10, 8, etc. And now I want to redo my baseline. Since I saved the baseline at the beginning, and I just want to update it for this section that has really changed, but I don't want to update it for all the other ones. We did the official change approval request for this section, and I have approval to do this. So I can just select these tasks. Just set baseline. Set baseline 1, but I just want my selected task, and I can choose also how to do my roll-ups here. So I have this level of granularity within the project client. So in PWA, I can set just the big baseline. In project client, I have to come in again to set those little dials. So another feature we mentioned was the timeline view. So as you might have noticed by now, we have timelines throughout projects. So we have it in the project client, we have it in the SharePoint project site, we have it in the project center, we have it in Schedule Web Part. You guys told us you liked timelines in 2010, so we put them everywhere. Hopefully you still like them. We all know it's a great visualization. One of the advantages of Project Client, though, with that visualization is more portable. So in PWA, everybody can see the same one, interact with it, but then not everyone's going to come to my project site or Schedule Web Part to see the timeline, are they? They're going to read the email, hopefully, I send. They're going to be in the presentation I do. So you need to get that timeline out of project and into some other Office application. Now for PWA, I can do that, but it's involving a screen cap, right? So I can take the snipping, draw my box, paste it in, and I get a solid image. With the project client timeline, I can select it, go copy timeline for presentation, since I'm putting it into PowerPoint, but you can choose whatever you want. Come down here. Woo. I have some long text, but if my text wasn't so long, it looks slightly better. And I can continue to update these items, including making that text a lot smaller so it fits better. And I can change this to match my theme. Etc. And still I have a timeline I like. So again, another advantage of the project client. One thing in the project client, you can have many timeline views. You can also do this in PWA. You have to update the, Web Part properties to change which timeline it shows. In project client, I can easily just click between them. So again, PWA basically has a version of a lot of the stuff I'm showing. Project client takes everything to the next step. And then another thing, last but definitely not least, I want to point out is the new reporting feature we added. So I showed some of this in the keynote, but this really is a valuable tool for project managers. And we have a bunch of report templates out of box, and these are great getting started points for you. So I can come into them. This one looks a little better. And I can see how my project's going. So I can answer some of those questions that we had that would be very hard to answer with the Schedule Web Part in Project Online. And again, I think one of the more valuable things, probably answering the questions, is looking professional. So lots of times, we might know the answer to questions. We might be able to tell people, but a picture speaks 1,000 words. So if you can show them a chart that shows you that, hey, we're actually on budget, we're on track, we're going to hit our deadlines, it goes a lot farther with people than hey, take my word for it. And you can really do anything with these reports. If you were in my last session, sorry for some repeat, but I just want to show people how much you can do with these reports. Because remember, these are built on the same technology that is used in Excel, Word, PowerPoint, etc. So if you can do it to an Excel table, you can do it here. Actually, Excel doesn't have tables. PowerPoint table, you can do it here. Excel charts, you can do it here. The only difference is you now have this field list associated with every chart and table, and this is where you can customize it. This difference is basically because we know what our data looks like where Excel doesn't, so they have to make theirs a little more manual. where we can customize ours to the experience. And we'll customize it in a second. Excuse me. I'm really not going to have a voice for singing at karaoke. So one thing you can do is you can change your time intervals. So I currently have this at weeks, but say we think thirds of months is a better way to show this. I can change that, and actually that probably isn't what I like, so we can change it again 2 months with a different date format. And now this is kind of like, we look at things at a monthly level, I'll change it to that. You look at things at a weekly level, we'll change it to that. Or your project's 6 years long. You can't look at weeks unless you come in here and you change your date range. So you can also do that. So say I only want to look at till now. And actually, since I'm doing months, that was too long. So again, come back and update it. So again, showing you all the power. You can really customize these however you want to. So another report that we really like is our overallocated resource report. And since we have that overallocation issue, this is another tool you can use to help solve it. So we said Glenn was the one that we couldn't solve because he's on too many other projects, right? So we have 986 hours to figure out. So we still know we have a big problem because I don't know how many days that is, but it sounds like a lot. And we can see exactly when he is overallocated too. So again, this chart as it is isn't super useful for me. But if I change it to weeks, I can see, let's see, Glenn's more these days. I'm still seeing some other resources. I'm going to filter those other resources out. So then I can just really focus on solving the Glenn issue. So I have this chart to help me. And as you saw, if I show this with, as I start to figure out my Glenn issues, don't know if I should be calling them Glenn issues. I hope no one's named Glenn here. I think I moved the wrong task earlier. Okay, those aren't them. So actually, he's mainly just in other projects overallocated, so I'll have to have those issues. I slightly changed my order of my demo, and I see it came back to bit me. But as you move things around here, you can see it. And actually, I'll unfilter. Here. So we will... Sorry, I'm trying to overallocate someone to show it. Never go off script. They always tell you that. Okay, we have Jill overallocated. So see, she is here as one of our overallocated resources. As I move that down, you notice she's no longer in the chart because she is no longer overallocated. So again, showing you how you can use the charts to help you solve the problem, and they're constantly updating so you can see when you solve the problem. So what did we learn? Never go off script in demos. Charts are always live. And then the same with the timeline is you can copy these reports into other views or into other Office applications. Again, because we know a big part of a project manager's job is sharing information. So one thing, copy report, paste it in. So just like earlier, it picks up all the formatting. I can continue to make changes here. If I want, I can just copy a part of this. So let's say I really just want this chart. Paste it in. You can do interactions like that. I can paste items into my report too. So if I have a picture, I want to use this to show, like customize it for my company, I can insert the picture. I can copy paste the picture in. You can even paste the timeline in if you want. It won't be connected anymore because it's pasting in as Office art shapes or just shapes. But you'll have the timeline there if you want it for a presentation. Or I can put it all over into PowerPoint, which is probably what I'm presenting from. So hopefully this shows you some of the power of the project client over PWA. I mean, project managers can live in one. Microsoft, of course, recommends they have both. But if you look at the user experiences, we think your project managers will be more successful if they have both. Another thing I wanted to cover was we added some new project types in Project 2013. And this, again, affects your decision around if you want to get the full project client for your project managers. Sorry. So in previous versions of Project Server, we only had projects in the enterprise project category. So basically, team members could only edit them by going through statusing. Project managers would edit them by checking them out, either in Schedule Web Part or Project Client making their updates. And then they'd have to approve anything coming from a team member. You could automate the approvals process if you wanted, but it had to go through some kind of approval. And this worked great if you had a project where you needed that kind of level of control over or processes over. But there's a lot of projects that happen that aren't in that category. They're more lightweight, they're more maybe not your main things that you're working on, but they're the side projects that are going on where you just want to track them, but then these projects actually do affect availability, so you want those to roll up into Project Server so you can still report on them and see them affecting resource availability and things like that. For those, we added a new project type called SharePoint Task List Projects. Yes, a long name, but it basically is what it is. It's a SharePoint task list that is connected to Project Server, so the data comes in, and I'll show all this. But the big things to remember with this are team members can edit this through the SharePoint task list. Basically, anybody you share this project site with will have edit permissions to it, so you don't have the control over it as a project manager is used to having, but you probably don't want the control over this. You want everybody to be able to come in and make changes as necessary. And the other change with these is the only place you can use the scheduling engine and schedule them is in the project client. You can't open them read, write in Schedule Web Part. Part of that is due to the technology that both of these are built on. SharePoint task list projects also don't go through the statusing loop. Since the approvals are applied, the changes are applied directly as team members are making them. So like for us, how we use these enterprise projects, are the biggest projects we do are features, of course. So adding features to the future releases of project. Those are all your enterprise projects. Your SharePoint task list projects are the things that are kind of the side things. So maybe we're building some new test tools, and we're kind of working a little on the side of those. It's never going to be the person's full day. It's just the side projects going on. We have a group of people on it that are picking things up as they become available. That's much more in the SharePoint task list project category. And let's see the difference between those. So if I come back to Project Server, not that Project Server, so in Project Center, you can see there's these different icons now. So all the ones that look like little Gantt charts are your enterprise projects. And if anybody is using project detail pages, or these things where you have a bunch of them, you can have new project types and have workflows and stuff associated with them. You can still use those. Every one of those is either an enterprise project or a SharePoint task list project. So for example, if you have a lot here today, those would probably be enterprise projects moving forward, but you could make them SharePoint task list projects moving forward, and that way they would still participate in workflow and get the custom fields you've associated with that type. But anyways, the little Gantt charts are enterprise projects. I don't know what you call it, it's supposed to look more like a SharePoint task list icon. It's your SharePoint task list projects. So let's drill into one of those. And notice my SharePoint task list works exactly like any SharePoint task list in project. Any SharePoint task list in SharePoint. So everything can be changed. I can come in. I can edit this list just like I'm used to. I can customize my view to add more fields if I want. So I'm going to do start date. Whoops. And I should have ordered start date earlier, but we'll just go with this. And you can see I have all this data here. I can work with it just like any other thing. If you're a team member on this, I don't need to know this data is being pulled into Project Server and confuse people. They can just come here and make the updates they want to make. But say I'm a resource manager and I want to look at what John Smith is working on. Let me go back to projects PWA. And if I go over into Resource Center and look at John Smith's availability, you will see that these projects are affecting his availability. So they actually, to Project Server, are real projects. To team members, there's these lightweight things that they're working on. What was their names? Okay, actually, let's change one to Garth, because he is definitely there. Some of them aren't, basically the issue I'm hitting is they're SharePoint users, but they're not PWA resources, since I didn't add them. But Garth is definitely there. So we'll actually come back to this in a minute, because it needs about 5 minutes to propagate over. But if I was going to, in 5 minutes, drill into Garth, which I'll show you, you would see this project affecting his resource availability. Now, say I want to schedule this project, since there's been some changes and all these tasks, if I come to the Gantt chart, are actually linked together. And we'll even move this out farther. So notice those tasks are all linked together. I move this out to be next week. None of my projects, or none of the other tasks, of course, are going to update because this is SharePoint task list. There isn't a scheduling engine behind it. So what are my options? Well, if maybe at first I try to go to project details and go to the schedule, but notice this says only enterprise projects can be edited here. So this, since it's a SharePoint task list project, can't be edited in PWA. You have to do it in the project client if you want the scheduling engine. So to do that, I go back to my project site. Let's drill into the task list, open with project, and now basically what it is doing, it is pulling data from both the project server and the SharePoint task list, merging those together. If there's any conflicts, I will see it, and I can, as the project manager, then approve or decline those conflicts. So what would cause a conflict? Basically, say I'm editing duration to be Friday, you're changing it to Wednesday at the same time. Next time I click Save from Project Client, I'll get to choose if I want to keep his Wednesday or my Friday. And we're thinking. Water break. It worked every single time last night. I guarantee it. Any Broncos fans out there? I think Peyton Manning was supposed to throw this one or something, and maybe he dropped it. Okay, let's try one more time. Here it went. Okay. Stage fright happens to all of us, right? Software is no different. So basically, what it did first was it pulled the data from Project Server. Then it pulled the data from the SharePoint task list. It merged all those together. There weren't any conflicts since I wasn't editing it at the same time. So it pulled the data in. And then remember, before I refresh here, that this task was finishing, develop, campaign, creative, and testing was finishing on the 18th. The next task was starting on the 14th, which isn't actually going to work because the first one is a predecessor. I open that in the project client. The great, amazing scheduling engine runs. And now those links are all updated because these are automatically scheduled tasks. So your team members, again, have that lighter user interface. They don't have a scheduling engine. They don't have anything like that to work with. But if you ever do need the more advanced features of a scheduling engine, you still have it in the project client for your SharePoint SharePoint task list projects. Now, the other project type was an enterprise project, right? So I said about those is you don't get the editing features in SharePoint Task List. So let's take a look at what we mean. So all of these that have the Gantt charts are SharePoint Task List projects or enterprise projects. And if I open this and go to the project site, you can see I see the timeline. So this is the same timeline I would see in the project client or schedule web part. I can see all the tasks. So the team members can still come here. They just can't update any of their projects through here. They have to go through PWA, probably because you want the control over this. You don't want any team member coming in. But it's great that they can still come in and see things. And again, this is the full SharePoint project site. So you can use your notebook, your document libraries, etc. So this can still be where the team members live and find all their collateral. It's just they have to go through statusing if they want to update their task. And by statusing, so this is a different project, but you can see I can't edit things here. I'm now in the role of Sarah Davis, but I've come over here, I see all these tasks assigned to me, and I can formally submit status just as my IT or my PMO office has said, this is how we submit status in our company, in our department group, whatever level you control that at. So you still get the full benefit of the project site, but you have still the full control of PWA. So net takeaway from that is in Project 2013, I was using Project Server, you have two types of projects, SharePoint Task List, collaborative, great. Only place you get scheduling engines and stuff is in the project client. Enterprise project works the exact same as all the projects you're used to in Project 2010 and earlier. So you don't actually need the project client to edit that one and use the scheduling engine. You just probably want it because of all those features I showed you earlier in the demos. Oh, that's not it. Okay, so what do you need? A question we get a lot is, do you need to match Project Pro for Office 365 Project Online and then Project Professional, the on-premise version of the client, with Project Server 2013? No, you can mix and match those. Basically, the top part's basically the same, the bottom part's basically the same, and they will talk to each other the exact same way. Net takeaway is you can mix them. So which one do you want? So Project Pro for Office 365 is the one that's sold as a subscription, so you can either pay monthly or yearly, and then you automatically get updates. By automatically get updates, so as Microsoft releases cumulative updates every other month with hot fixes, you'll automatically get those applied. The other thing you automatically get is at some point down the road, when a future version of Office is released, you can automatically move to that. That one doesn't happen without you seeing it. You'll be able to click a button to say you want it, but since it's a subscription, you have it. You can install it on 5 devices because it's not a machine level license, it's a user level license. So I have a lot of machines up here. I can put on every one of these if I want. This is great for people who have the home PC. They don't want to haul the laptop home, but they want the project client, and we know they're probably not going to go out and buy their own version of project client. You also have On Demand. So basically, Office 365 comes with Office On Demand. It's the ability to stream Office applications onto computers. The example I used last hour is who on the East Coast or Midwest got stranded somewhere. Maybe when you were stranded somewhere, you didn't have your laptop and you needed Office or Project. If you had Project Pro for Office 365, you could stream it onto that computer, do whatever changes you needed to your project schedule, probably move everything out because the weather got in the way, save it, and then when you clicked out a project, it's no longer on that machine. No security issues like that. And who was in my things you guys were? It was pretty quick, wasn't it? And I was remoted over 3 machines for that demo too. And it's Pro only. So if you want Project Standard, it won't work for Project Pro for Office 365. Project Professional, biggest advantages of, well, you own it outright. So if you buy Project Professional 2013, you can use it till the end of time. At some point, Microsoft says they stop supporting it, but it is yours to use for your life. You also control everything, so as hotfixes come out, etc., you can opt into whether you want to apply them. When the new version of Office comes out at some point in the future, you can decide when to buy it and install it. And it also comes in standard. Now, next question is, which one between Project Standard and Project Professional? Project Standard has great scheduling. It has most of the rich views. It has all the new reporting features that I showed you. Project Professional has everything in Standard Plus, connects to SharePoint Task List and PWA. If you're in this session and read the description and saw that it's about working with PWA, you probably want Project Professional then, because your Project Standard is not going to work with it. The other difference is you have your team planner there. Inactive Task is a pro-only feature. The new link integration that you might have kind of seen some of the dots going by as I was demoing, that's all pro-only. And it comes in Click to Run, which is, Click to Run is the same as saying Project Pro for Office 365. It's the whole Office streaming. Another thing to point out, we love your feedback. I hopefully called out a couple of features along the way that we changed based on your feedback. The one I'll highlight the most is how when you open a project read-only in the client, we show you that message bar. That came from much feedback from you guys and from our team too. Trying to think of other things. Save baseline, adding that to schedule web part. That was a big piece of feedback we heard. The ability to set units, wanting the timeline everywhere. So we do a lot of features based off feedback, actually most of them. So now I ended slightly early, so we have lots of time for questions. So any questions? SharePoint Task List projects, can you track your time in timesheets? Not if you're in single entry mode, because then you're part of the statusing loop. Trying to think if you can add to your timesheet other ways. Let me actually. I'm kind of blanking on that one. You definitely can't do statusing. You may be able to add it to your timesheet because timesheets are separate. Do you have to promote it to enterprise? Okay, thank you. So no, you cannot add those to your timesheet. What you could do is in your timesheet, you could have a category for like non-project time or whatever you want to call it, and you could track your time against those projects in that place, but it would be more of like a generic bucket. So like in my example, it would have been a bucket on like working on tools. Is there a link online to show you the difference between Project Pro and Project Online? So all these recordings of the sessions will be available at some point after the conference. It's typically not that long after, so you'll definitely have that. In addition, if you go to office.microsoft.com, you can select which product you want and projects in that list. You can find a lot of great help articles on it. Bing, just Bing it. I would go back to the slide I have. The biggest advantages of Project Pro for Office 365 is you're constantly going to be on the latest version and get the updates, and you have the 5 computers. So I'd probably step back and look, do I want to always be on the latest, and how many machines do I think this person needs to install it on? If you're a one computer person, it's not going to be as big of a deal. If you have multiple, you might want that. Also, if you're using Project Online versus Project Server, you might want to match them more, which is what we tend to see in most customers. Sure. That one. Yes. What was your question specifically? Let's try to. So this task is basically, you're basically trying to figure out why this task is showing up where it is?
No, I know why it is. If you double click on task 16, what is the predecessor for that?
It's because it's actually not being driven by a predecessor right now. It's being driven by this summary task.
Right, so there's a, if you go to constraint, no, there's not shown. See, it's still showing up as task 15 as the predecessor.
Oh, so what I see your question. Okay. So this milestone is basically what all these tasks are connected to, right? This milestone right here. And basically what we do when you inactivate it is we look at the last active task, and that is this one. So because these tasks, I can't really see where I'm pointing, because, because these tasks are all starting here, this one jumps back there, and this one is essentially now being driven by that milestone.
Okay, but task 16, when you double click on it, it's showing task 15 as the predecessor.
Yeah, we don't update the predecessor links. We just update the drawing. But if I move this out to the 31st, notice how everything moved out. So this, where's my pointer? This milestone is actually what is now driving this task. We leave the predecessors as is, because that way if I reactivate those tasks, everything will go back to how it was. We did debate at one point drawing that extra link line in to kind of your confusion, so I guess it's good feedback that it is causing a little confusion. Yeah, it's still showing 15, or this one. Oh, task path? Sorry, I thought I heard task inspector. So it's showing the milestone as the predecessor. So yeah, it is a little inconsistent. That's a very good eye, I must say. I hadn't even noticed that. But actually, the inactive tasks, they used to all jump back to the beginning when you'd inactivate some, and we've updated in 2013, so it respects the last predecessor that was active. Mm-hmm. So it's more of a visual thing. Yeah.
A lot of users going mobile. If our users want to go mobile with projects, do they just have to use PWA? Is there any type of like project overnight that they can run on a tablet or a phone?
So question, if they want to go mobile, do they just have to use PWA, or is there something for mobile devices? Basically depends what device you're on. I mean, if you saw the keynote, he was on a pretty small Windows tablet that's running full Windows, so of course you could use the project client on that. If you're on anything iPad, Android, or the phones, you would either need to use PWA, or a number of partners have built some really great phone apps, because PWA sometimes on the phone can be a little too not meant for phones. So we have a lot of apps that are good too. So once you paste the data over into like PowerPoint? So the question is, once you paste the data from your report into PowerPoint and then you make a change in your project schedule, is that report going to reflect it? That we don't feature functionality we don't have. You would have to repaste your report from project. It's that they actually like host an Excel spreadsheet in PowerPoint to do that, and we didn't have that functionality. But they do automatically update in projects. So as you remember when I had split the views and I'm updating, they're always reflecting. So you don't have to refresh in the project client. It's only once you paste it into PowerPoint. or Word, Excel, whatever other Office application. Up front.
Right. One benefit, I think, that the project client gives that you mentioned versus the schedule web part is the ability to make master projects.
Oh, actually, I had that in the notes. I skipped it. You're correct.
Okay, well, that part's all right then. But I was just wondering, because I also noticed that you can save master projects around SharePoint 2013, which you couldn't before. But is there any way to deal with these separate projects as task lists and still be able to edit them as a SharePoint task list as a master project, or does master project just go away in the SharePoint task list and you just basically save it as an MPG file in SharePoint?
That is a great question. I really wish I remembered the answer. So basically the question, there's a lot of questions in there. First one, master projects. That is a great point. If you're dealing with master projects, in Schedule Web Part, they're read-only, and you can't expand the sub-projects, so you can only view the master projects task. To view the sub-projects or to edit it, you have to open it in the project client. I missed that one, so great point. Second point is you can now save master projects as SharePoint document libraries. We previously did not support that. The question I'm going to have to look up later, I'll get back to you, is if you have SharePoint task list projects, can you insert those into a master project that you then save up to Project Center, or essentially?
Yeah, I mean, I just noticed you can do editing things in a SharePoint task list that you can't do on the schedule web part for a variety of reasons, like, that you can't edit in the schedule web part, like task calendar. So you can still edit those in the SharePoint task list, but now that you can save, well, first of all, the client is the only place I think you can make a master project. So that's
Correct.
But once you've done that, yeah, just kind of wondering about that savings in the SharePoint task list.
Actually, we're all friends here, right? We'll just try it. We ended a couple minutes early. If people, I'm kind of going off the cuff here because we ended a little early doing questions. Feel free to leave if you want to get somewhere else, but it's a great question, so we'll try it out. Oh, that's my CFO. So I have to first close my CFO campaign, because remember that was my visibility project, or my SharePoint task list projects. And actually, the code name we used for a while for SharePoint task list projects was visibility projects, because PWA has visibility into them. So it's a good way to think about it, too. So we closed that project. Let's see if we can insert it. So yeah, they have to be enterprise projects to put them into a master project. So great question, great reminder for me. Any other questions? Back? I'm not as familiar with that area. It's basically a question, to put it in short, was asking timesheet behavior, then rolling back into Project Client. There's a session either Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday morning that drills down into timesheets. That'd be a great question to take to that session. Or the girl who owns this is Aisha. She's about this tall, Indian. She will be able to help you too. And she's in a green shirt. So actually on that, I'll end. Thank you very much for going with me. We went a little off cuff, but hopefully people learned a lot and it still worked. Thanks.